Give that in a really simple way, because it's not like the person is consciously trying to put you in your place, but it's just how things are set up. It's easy to look down on work that you see as being like trivial and feminine, and it's not important because it's trivial and you know what I mean? Like, and this is not something I've ever spoken about before, but I felt like it really tied into the conversation we have and we need to be having.
And the thing that you were talking about being, talking about what you want to say in your work, and really going into like how you're sharing things from your journal, not centering as much. Talking about that spectrum of emotions reminded me of something I heard in a documentary, but I can't remember. I just remember the vague notion of what was said, and also reminded me of the interview I did with Annalise Solis, where but the notion of it is, even though it might seem counterintuitive, or maybe just it seems counterintuitive because we've strayed so far from it that now it seems counterintuitive, but it actually isn't. But the notion that the more personal it is, the more things the more people you actually touch, and the more you actually resonate. So the more specific and the more personal you make something, it actually widens the breadth of the people that you touch, which seems strange, but when you were talking, it reminded me of that, like not trying to, because when she did her exhibit and she stopped thinking about how it would be received, she did the most powerful work that she did. So really about, just going into you and expressing what that is.
And there's a kind of trap inherent in that too, because we could easily feel that, okay, I'm going to go on Facebook or Instagram and I'm just going to just spill all the details of my personal life, and it's going, but, and I guess that's, social media could be tough waters to navigate because of that. But I think what the thing is that when it's personal, it's authentic, and the key is the authenticity of it. It's not, there's no artifice involved, and what you've been through. You could speak about that honestly. You could speak about that without, contriving, or it's something that you could flow from, and others would relate to on a kind of primal level. But at the same time, there can be like a lot of pressure to talk about yourself all the time or to talk about things that you're not ready to talk about. And it's always important to respect your own boundaries and allow yourself your own space. And it's something so liberating, and not knowing that you don't owe anyone every detail of your life.
And I guess it's all part of the learning, like the learning and learning the boundaries, and to share and to give yourself validation. But when the word artifice really struck me just now, with not dealing with artifice, because I feel like, tying into the whole thing I was saying before, I feel like the world is coming back to that place. Like, it's kind of like, like the prodigal son, or like that story when you drift really far away. And I feel like that's what's happening globally now. Like,
longing for something real.
I feel like that's what's happening now, like, with the climate and all the Me Too movement, but not to, again, I don't want to oversimplify that as well as a slogan, but I feel like the world is saying, okay, everybody's coming back to the essence. I feel like that's what's happening everywhere, and it all ties together, everybody's coming back to their own essence. I feel like male-female relations is very important for that to be healed, everywhere, and that's like the restoration of everything is how I feel. I mean,
That's beautiful.
That's what I think. Okay, so I feel like that was a really good long emotional intro. So I feel like now I could ask you, but that was like a lot of what I had on the first card. Well, actually, I actually do still want to ask this question because a lot of the first part was about like, you know, motherhood and how it affected your work and all that. So I actually do want to ask this question, which is, and if it's too personal, you could say if you don't want to answer it, but when you had Raphael, did you, like before you had him, did you always think to yourself you wanted to have more than one child, or was that kind of like a process as well?
I think when I met my husband when we were 17 years old, which is a long time ago, and I think maybe when we were still 17 or 18, we said to each other, I think I want 2 children. And, you know, at the time it was just probably, you know, one of those things that teenagers say, but I kind of always knew.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that kind of thing like I'm waiting and I'm counting down the years and I must have these 2 children. You know, it just kind of happened.
Right.
Yeah, as children do.
So so now these, well, just like 2 questions is talking about kind of work and productivity, and you touched on that as well. But one of the things that I always find about your work, which is always interesting to me, is the quantity of work that you do, but not just the quantity, it's also the I don't know if quality is the word, not quite quality, but the substance of it. And again, yeah, you did touch on this as well, and something that Eckhart told, was it Tolle? But I think you know who I'm talking about. He's, in one of these videos I was looking at with him, he spoke to that in the sense where a lot of the consumerism, it's a lot of productivity and it's a lot of producing and it's a lot of things, but there's a essence and there's a soul to it that's missing when it's just kind of like a manufactured line. And what always strikes me about your work is I feel like you create a lot of work, but I always feel like it's very rich and it's very deep. And I wondered if that is, it's just my curiosity, like I wonder if it's just because it's so much a part of you, it just like that's how it happens, or I wonder if there's actually some kind of consciousness that goes into it, like if you have things that you do that kind of keep you in that place so that your work has a certain vibration.
I have seasons, like I could only describe it as that. So I have times of the year when I just need to paint, like it's like a itch, you know, there's a driving force behind it, and there's just something I need to work out. There's an idea that I need to kind of flesh out and make it physical. And until I feel like that's satisfied, I sketch and sketch and I paint and paint. And it normally happens at the beginning of the year, which is random. I don't know if there's some kind of overarching order behind it, but I have times of the year when I need to do my own personal work. And then of course there's times of the year when there's commissions on projects and things like that. But I try to honor that creatively rich time, and I kind of space out how I share the work. So whereas the work I share for a whole year might be created within a 3-month span of time. So they're like, you know, not physically always connected pieces, you know, like not a clear-cut collection to say that I make them to be a collection, but there's some kind of spiritual, or like the thought process is connected and all the pieces go together in some kind of way.
This is related to that, but it's really just like a exploratory question, which is, there's a concept that I heard someone called Elizabeth Lesser speak about when she was doing an interview with Oprah, and she was talking about this concept of deep time. And I'm not sure that it's her concept, it's just where I heard about it. And I mean, I feel like when you hear the phrase deep time, I feel like there's a kind of intuitive understanding of what it means. And I felt that as well. And she was saying, you know, there was something specific that happened in her life, and she felt that throughout that period she was in deep time. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other aspects of her life, it's not quite the same feeling as, you know, the busyness and the things that have to happen. Yeah. And again, exploratory question. And the reason why I said it is because it tied into what I was saying before, which is where I feel like even though you do so much, I feel like there is always that rich essence behind it. But I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of that deep time, and if you think that that is something that possibly might be expanded in the future, like maybe that is some place where we actually could reside all the time. Or I wonder if you think that there's a certain quality to it that kind of requires that contrast so you can feel the deep time, or if people can, or if we could all just live in deep time and it would be a better existence. This is a totally random question.
That's an amazing question.
But I just...
and I will be thinking about it next week probably. But from my understanding of it, I feel like
I feel like we're in deep time right now.
We kind of do feel like that.
I feel like I'm in deep time right now, and like, you know, when in my interview process, there's like things that I'm thinking about, and then I'm also considering the interviewee, and there's a lot of things, a lot of big amalgam that goes on, and coming up with what I want to get across or touch on. I just felt like it's just something I'm thinking about. It's not like it's not like to get a direct answer, but just something I just felt like exploring, you know?
When you mentioned it, my mind immediately went to maybe the first 4 weeks after Dante, my second son, was born. And a lot of my time was spent alone with him because, you know, balancing with Raphael. And so we had to kind of divide and conquer. So his sleep pattern was kind of all over the place as newborns are, and we would have these mornings, these like really otherworldly mornings, maybe from 3 to 7 or longer, and it would just be this very kind of underwater feeling, blur of like low light sunrise, and I would paint until he woke up, and then, you know, he would feed and go back to sleep, and I would paint, and no interruption from the outside world, like just, you know, light coming in through the windows. And that was one of my kind of creative flow periods where I have a whole series of mermaid paintings that came out of that period. And, you know, there are parts of your life that you remember like vaguely, and you remember what happened but not in clear detail, and then there are parts that you just remember in HD every second, how it felt, how, like, what you smelled, what your emotional state was. Like, that was one of those periods. And despite, you know, it being like a rough physical period, it was such a rich creative period. And in hindsight, I don't really know how how that was even possible, but I probably churned out like a painting every 2 days during that period, small paintings, and it was just, if I had to think about deep time, that's right where I went immediately. It's a kind of altered state where time has a kind of different meaning. And when I think about like creating how I want to and producing how I want to, it's that state I'm always looking for. Especially with writing, because I feel like with writing, the outside voices are a problem. It's difficult to get it. I think of it as slipping into a different sort of consciousness, into a different kind of way of being. and it requires a kind of turning down the volume on other things, and time moves different, and your brain moves different, and somebody could be talking to you and you're not going to know, and that I would consider that like the most creative. You enter into that part of your brain where like creation happens, where ideas happen, and you know, that kind of magical flow that feels greater than you. Yeah, and I one of my favorite terms to describe, you know, like art that transcends, and the space that transcends is the word duende, which is I believe the writer Federico Garcia Lorca, and I need that tattooed at some point in time. But it's art that goes past the kind of physical boundaries and becomes something higher than art, and becomes something mystical and spiritual, and like transcends you. And that's where my mind went when I think about the concept of deep time. And it's impossible to kind of set the stage for it. It's just, it feels like we're in it now, kind of.
Yeah. Even though I do feel like I kind of set the stage for it in a little way, and even though I kind of got a sense of the potential for this to happen, because I know what energy you bring, and I kind of know, you know, like I kind of had a sense of the potential for it to happen. But it's just something that I've been considering with, really, I don't know the answer, but it's just a question that's been there. Like, I wonder if, you know, that is just how life is, if that's just like the package of life, like that's just what you get. Like you get some things that are just about being efficient and producing, and then you get those moments of deep time. Or I wonder if life could actually be just a continuous experience of deep time, or if it was always that, if you might not appreciate it.
I think you need to feed it. Like, you need to feed it with experiences. And I can't remember who told me this, a writer told me this, that there are, you know, seasons to live and experience, and I kind of feel out the textures of what you're feeling to go through it. And then there are seasons where you process, and you kind of, I guess, input and output.
It's like cycles. It's like cycles. And you know, like that's part of the whole question. Like maybe part of the experience is that contrast, you know, to kind of really, when you get there, you kind of understand it as a different level, you know?
I think so.
So it's something that's just in my mind, and time will tell. Time will tell how it goes.
It's an amazing question.
Really?
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing question.
Oh my God.
It's one of those questions that you have no idea how you're going to respond, and then like, it's
me neither. I've been asking myself too. I don't know either.
No, I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while.
Yeah, because I'm just like, oh, you know, like I'm trying to figure out like what is the state? Like, is it a state that we actually could access, and that we could just be living at a higher state, or is it kind of like this is kind of the framework for life to kind of have that duality?
Maybe a bit of both, because I suppose this is what people seek, and when they go on like artist retreats and they just drop everything and go and live in some remote location and simplify, but at the same time, what do you have to draw upon after? It's like for exploration. It's like, it's reminding me of I found this guy recently, and I am obsessed with him. Like, I have to edit this out, but like literally, I want to make his babies. Like, okay, so I don't know if I actually want to. Anyway, the point is, there's a difference between actually wanting to make them and actually there's an impulse that you get in your mind sometimes, and you see somebody and you're like, would not recommend impulsively making babies.
No, I'm definitely not doing that. Like, that's a strong no. I think everybody who knows me understands this is not going to be something impulsive. Like, this is going to be very premeditated. But no, but like I get the impulse, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I will have your child. But so I might have said this out. But I'm just so obsessed with this guy. He's not a local guy, but I'm so obsessed with him. His name is Thomas Hubel, and he's born in Austria. But he works a lot with like a lot of really out there concepts, but I mean applicable to life, but just where he's just the kind of concepts that he's talking about and the way he articulates things and his depth and his whole energy is just like, I'm just obsessed. Like, every time I see a video with him, I need to watch it. But he deals a lot with like healing and trauma and spirituality, so that's where his and collective trauma and stuff. And like one of the things that he was talking about in one of his talks is about like work itself and how society works, and how by the time like we have periods and we have vacation in the typical construct where the majority of society works at an office and Monday to Friday, whatever, but that the job leaves you so depleted that by the time you go on vacation, you're actually like, you're at zero.
Yeah.
And that whole system of like being at work, you just feel like you're depleted and depleted and depleted, and then like you have to take this thing off so you can just be able to function. Yeah. And you know, like one of the things that he was talking about is, and I think for him it's an exploration as well of, is that a signpost that something's wrong? Like one of those things that I was saying before, kind of like with the female intuition, where it's just been accepted for so long that you kind of think, we just accept that, okay, work is just going to make you feel horrible. And then you'll just feel horrible. Like we all feel horrible, it's fine. And I think he's exploring that as well. Like, is it one of those things where it's just like that's what it is, or is it showing us that something is off, and where work should actually be energizing you, and there should be a kind of renewal within that system, you know? So it's like, kind of like, just like I said, like one of those things for exploration, you know, which I find interesting. But so I wanted to talk about your work as a kind of like your work as business, because I think there are persons who watch my content who have things that they want to do, and some of them are artistic endeavors and they want to know how to live and survive off of it. Yeah. So I wondered what advice you would give to creatives who are just starting out in business or thinking of starting something.
Take it seriously. A lot of the feedback I get, a lot of the question and like the energy I get from it, from like young artists and all that is, you know, I like to draw, so, you know, it's always going to be like that, you know, and it's work, and not to the extent where you sacrifice your happiness and your love for what you do for productivity, like we were saying, but you commit it in the same way that you would commit to anything else. And yes, you do it because you love it, but you also commit it, and there will be things that going to be hard and going to push you out of your comfort zone, and would not be necessarily what you choose to do, although the end goal is you do what you want and you get paid. But take it seriously, and that is something you struggle against when you tell, you know, your family and your loved ones, I'm going to be an artist too, because I think almost everyone gets that, well, that's something you do as a hobby, but how you're going to live off it, the whole starving artist, you don't make money off that kind of thing. And that hasn't been true for me, and I will tell anyone that who willing to listen, or who has any kind of doubts, or whose child wants to be an artist, there are definitely ways, but definitely you treat it like work, and you have to separate what you do for you and what you do, you know, as jobs and that kind of thing, because you don't want to lose your creative self and your own direction in the whole bustle, especially when things get busy. You want to kind of keep a part of your voice secret as well.
And is that something that you had to kind of traverse when you started as well, in terms of that specific commitment bridge? And how did you deal with it?
Well,
did you have some of those things from outside that were kind of doubtful?
Most definitely. Ever since I could remember myself, I wanted to draw, and I wanted to be an artist, and I remember telling my grandmother, like at maybe 6 years old, I want to illustrate children's books when I grow up. And recently I was like, yes, I'm doing it, yes. But you know, the response would always be, that's something you do for fun, and so you find a real grown-up job, and you do that for money, and you draw in your free time. So I started off teaching. I was an English teacher at secondary school. I did that for 2 years, and I enjoy working with children. I still do. I still teach art classes, but you know, the calling kind of got so loud, I just had to kind of see where it would go. And so the first job I got was an illustration job, and I had no idea what to do. And there was a lot of floundering. And my husband does the digital stuff, and I do the art, and there was so much mess. Oh my goodness, there was so much mess trying to digitize these things and, you know, get them to fit, and I tried to do prints and things like that. With trial and error, it was terrible and embarrassing. But we kind of learned how to make it a business, invest in it, get the tools you need, take yourself seriously, which is a hard thing to do. Like, it doesn't sound like it's a complicated thing to do, but it is a very complicated thing to do. To trust in your own ability to adapt to what comes, and to a certain extent, I'm cautious of saying this, but I do believe it, to kind of trust in the balance of the universe, that when you put out certain things, you receive certain things. I've always had really interesting jobs. I've always gotten really interesting and fulfilling jobs. And I don't know if that's just luck, or I don't know if it's like I've been secretly working some kind of law of magnetism.
Yeah. It reminds me of this other thing, this guy called Jerry Winstrom, I don't know if that's the right name, but really like dedicated to maybe what one would call the voice of the call of his soul, maybe one would call it that. Mm-hmm. And how, you know, it might not be an extravagant life, but life gave him and continues to give him what he needs. Yeah. And it's almost like an ease and a flow. Yeah. As he committed to that path. Yeah. And you know, I suppose, and I wonder and think about the world that exists if everybody is kind of adhering to that same kind of call of their soul, to call it that.
That makes me think of what you were saying about work, and if work necessarily has to deplete you, if it's just something we accept, that if we treat work as something that each person inherently has the calling to do a specific thing that calls out to their soul, and you know, if our desire to be productive is kind of destroying, you know, our callings, for want of a better word, or not even on a personal scale, but it's a lot. to think about.
Yeah.
And then people, you kind of get this reaction like you've gone completely mad when you decide like, I don't want to be committed to, you know, a contracted job employed by somebody else anymore. I want to kind of follow my dreams and see what happens. Yes. Yeah. You get this kind of blank stare, like, yeah.
And I just kind of imagine and think about, you know, what it would look like, you know, like, what would it be like? Because I think, okay, I don't know that I think it would ever be a perfect world. I mean, what is perfect anyway? But I just kind of wonder, how would it contrast what's there now?
Capitalism.
What do you mean?
No, because, you know, there's this whole overarching structure of work for profit. Everything driven towards profit, and that's a hard thing to think past.
Yeah, I kind of think about, you know, I kind of think about that world as just something I think about, and like energetically, how would it feel, and how would everybody else feel, and like physically, what would it look like? And what would interactions on a daily basis be like?
It would affect everything, from the morning commute to, you know, to, I guess, people's like medical situations and that kind of thing.
So, just things I think about.
Interesting things.
I think you touched on this as well, but I'll still, let me see, I have to kind of like gauge my time. Oh, I have a whole nother thing.
1 hour, 18 minutes.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time. So I think you touched on that already, so I won't. Yeah, I'm going to see how many I could get. What are some ways that, no, you spoke about that too. I'll still ask, what are some ways that you have evolved as an artist that have been surprising to you and delightful or just intriguing, but like something you didn't expect?
I've become a lot more structured, and I understand the value of being organized, which my husband probably laughing in the corner at that, but I kind of went into being an artist as things flow and mess is part of it and chaos is lovely, and now I understand the need for structure and the need to kind of have a plan and kind of keep things in order, be organized, have records and that kind of thing. And I suppose that ties into taking yourself seriously and taking your work seriously. But the more work that comes and the more kind of serious jobs with illustrations and like working for publishers and that kind of thing, it becomes more and more necessary. But it makes work easier, which, I mean, 5 years ago couldn't have told me that. But you grow and you learn.
Yeah. What tips or learnings would you share that have helped you as an artist / working mother? I feel like I'm so, I feel like I'm almost on tenterhooks now. I hope that's the right way to say it. Because there's so many opinions, which is kind of like the double-edged sword of making everybody have a voice, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying by any means, but like when I read things about mothering, there's so many things that people feel strongly about, and then I'm just trying to be sensitive. I'm like, okay, I don't want to say, like, I want to use, like, what's a good term to use for this? I don't want anybody to, like, I don't want to come across the wrong way. But what tips or learnings can you share that have helped you as an artist / working mother in terms of productivity, efficiency, personal wellness, family health?
I'm still very much learning that, because what worked with one child is not working with 2 children. But
you have to split them up. One house. I
suppose anytime you make small increments of time and use it. At the moment, I don't have advice for myself very much because I'm just kind of making it work. But ask for time and help from your support system if you have that where you need it, because it's hard enough to raise small children that relatively close together in age, but if you're working especially from home and doing that at the same time, there's a lot of, mommy, don't answer that email, I want to press something, and yeah, you with one hand you type in a response, or you filling out a contract and you printing a coloring page at the same time. True story. But it's a lot, and take time when you get it, and know that they don't stay small for very long. And what has helped for me is to try to involve them, honestly. Not a great hack, but try to involve them and, find toddler scaled down versions to what you're doing so they feel involved. I baby wear a lot, so one strapped to my chest, and it's kind of a madhouse, but it works.
Right.
Yeah, and I will look back on it someday and be like, survive that.
That's funny. That's very funny. Okay, so kind of wrapping up. Oh, I wanted to ask, in terms of your poetry and your art, did they kind of both start around the same time in your life?
Yeah, I think as far as I could remember, I've been both writing and drawing and painting, but they kind of branched out in two different directions. I started writing more at UE, when I was at UE, and the writing kind of received more encouragement, as it was seen as something academic, and the art kind of was the other calling of my heart that I could not ignore afterwards. But they kind of the funny thing is that they do converge, and they're very much at their heart about the same thing. But I say they operate on two different wavelengths because they require a different kind of headspace and flow. So they kind of started in the same place and right back in the same place, which is probably, I should have followed my own kind of organic path in the first place, but such is life.
What are some of your future dreams as an artist?
I don't know. That's something I think about, because if I had asked myself 10 years ago what my future dreams were, I don't think I would have arrived at, because some of the most exciting things have been things I couldn't anticipate. And so I guess just to keep growing in the direction I meant to grow, and I try to keep doing that every year, and it's something I think I've done every year. And I mean, it's hard to say, and I don't want to put a cap on anything by giving a direction where it doesn't want that direction.
I felt that you would say that.
Let it flow.
Yeah. I know you've done a lot of work now, but is there any of your pieces that really kind of, I guess at different points in your life it might be different things, but is there anything that kind of stays with you, like any of your pieces or any of your poems that's kind of really dominant in your psyche?
There is a piece I just cannot let go of. I kept it, I ended up keeping it. It's the largest painting I ever did, and it's probably the most ambitious one, because I tried to kind of create a whole sort of tableau, a whole scene, and it's like maybe 5 feet by 3 feet or something like that, and there are 3 people, a child, a mother, a grandmother, and 2 deer, to fawns, and it took me months because I was just trying to get so much into it. I was trying to build this story of, generational wisdom and wisdom from the earth and kind of trusting where you are and that kind of thing. And I don't think that one is going to have to stay in my personal collection because I just cannot. It's not just the size, and it took a long time, but I think I invested so much into it emotionally that I cannot part with it.
And if you had to pick like one of your favorite poems that you've done, what would it be?
I do have favorite poems. Let me see, let me think. I have a poem called Boa Gravida that I wrote the day before Raphael was born, and in retrospect I think I was in a deep time state because I was probably in early labor and just kind of zoning and waiting, and it's a special poem because it will always be associated with that time, and it was kind of a poem for him, and it's in my book, and I read it recently and cried because it was shortly after the birth of Dante, and it just was very charged emotionally. Yeah.
I wonder how you interact with your poems, because I recently did a book of poems that I've done over a number of years, but this is just me. It's just me talking now, just Ashana. But I'm interested in how you interact with poetry and how you see yourself as a quote-unquote poet. Because I did a book of my poetry, but like up until a year ago or maybe a year and a half before I decided to do the book, it's not something I ever thought that I would do. Mm-hmm. It's just that I would write poems at different times about different things. Yeah. And then I felt, I think this is actually a good body of things to put together, and I did. But because I never really conceptualized myself in that way, I'm curious about how somebody else who really has been steeped in that work, like how you relate to.
The thing is, I don't think I'm a great capital P poet. I feel very out of sorts when I have to do panel discussions and that kind of thing because, oh boy, it's just inappropriate thing to say. I feel so much of it is just talking. Talking in a very kind of vague way about poetry with a capital P in general. When like the writing is what I love. Yeah. The writing and the sharing of it, and not so much the whole structure of like complex discussion and academia that's around it sometimes, and which could be so kind of excluding, it could be so intimidating and act as a barrier to the work itself. That's a terrible thing to say, but it is what it is. And I think you kind of know when the collection is done, you kind of get a feeling that there's something whole here, and I've said something that I needed to say, and it's wrapped up. And what has been really intense was separating myself from the collection when it was published and knowing that, okay, this is out of my hands now, is in a book, is out there, people are going to review it, and it's going to be, nominated for prizes and stuff like that. I actually, it's completely unrelated, but my book Those Songs was actually awarded the Bocas Poetry Prize the same month Dante was born, and it was such an intense, also a deep time experience because I was extremely largely pregnant and having to go do like the press stuff and all that, and he was moving very big movements during readings and things like that. And yeah, I'm not great at separating the act of writing and reading and kind of letting the poetry be what it is from like the big overarching things like publicizing, and I mean, it gets done, but it's always a bit strange because it's this thing that you wrote by yourself in such a personal way, and then it's just out there in a book. And I guess it also ties back to taking the work seriously, which maybe I'm a little more comfortable doing with the art than the poetry.
Yeah. But I think you said something I needed to hear when you said, you just know when it's whole, and you know that where you said something that you needed to say.
Yeah.
Because I said that exact phrase almost word for word when I spoke to somebody about the book.
Yeah.
And I said, actually when I did, was like, okay, will be what it is. This is what's going to be in the book, whatever. I was actually telling somebody that I think I could die now, like in the sense, not in a die of happiness way, like die in a, I feel that I said exactly what you said, which is I feel that I had something that I needed to say, and now I've said it.
Yeah, it's a sense of completeness.
And I literally, if I die now, I feel okay.
But like then, I felt like that after wrapping up the manuscript. And then kind of out of nowhere, you start writing again and you realize, maybe I have other things to say.
No, I think I do have other things to say, and I will find things to say. I know, and I will do lots of other things. But there was something like, it's exactly the words that you use, and exactly the words that but it was like in the context of my life. Like I feel like I had something to say, and I said it.
And there's something very necessary in letting that rest. Like, it's out, it's a whole thing in the world, and like I think of it as you gave life to that, and that now exists outside of you. This thing that you had to say now exists outside of you. And now the question is what you're going to do with it, which is probably where you're at now.
Yeah, not. I don't even feel that inclination of having to do anything with it. I just feel that it's done. Yeah. It's there, and I just feel if I died from any point from there on, it's just the fact that I said that. I just feel peace.
That's a beautiful thing, because so many people write with the intention of publishing, which I feel you kind of maybe crippling yourself while you're writing. Writing for getting the thing out sake, I think, is something beautiful, and you're kind of giving yourself that creative freedom, because I don't write and think about publishing. I write because I need to write to get it out and give it that life and be done with that thing that I needed to say. So I relate to that very much.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh, I feel like that spoke to me. Like that was an important thing that I had to hear. So this is to wrap up. I mean, I know you do lots of different things, but just for the people watching, like how can they interact with your different work? Like what are the different formats that they can get your work in? You know, you do portraits, you know, you have books and different things, and then if they want to get in contact with you for any reason, how would they get on to you?
Doing a whole lot of different projects these days. I'm on Facebook, Danielle Boodoo-Fortune Art. I am on Instagram, the Boodoo-Fortune Art. I have an online store on Etsy, which should be searchable. I have a book of poetry, Those Songs, which is on Amazon, and is almost always at paper-based in the Normandy. This feeling like my bio, though. It's long and tedious. I recently illustrated a children's book, Lost, a Caribbean Sea Adventure, which is authored by Joanne Hillhouse. That's definitely in paper-based in Normandy and at Metropolitan Booksellers. I do portraits as well. I do just commissions if people feel spiritually called to something. There's something they always wanted to see, kind of a vision. come to life, I'm forgetting lots of things.
Yeah, well, basically, I guess once they get to your portal, they'll
Yeah.
kind of be able to explore the
Yes,
different things.
and I give art classes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like we touched on a lot of things, even though to me it made sense, but I don't know if, you know, like sequentially to the video format, like to bring it together.
'Cause it's a lot.
It is. But I don't know if there's anything that you want to say at all, just wrap.
I think we talked a lot.
All right. So, phone number, your phone number. Or you don't
I
like
don't
to
really
do
do the
number?
phone thing because children
Smart.
are always crying in the background.
Smart.
But my email is Boodoo-Fortune@live.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. This is so fun. I'm so excited.